Time for us to turn our attention to the Six Nations depth chart. We're moving on to the second row, and I'm delighted to say Malcolm O'Kelly is with us. Malcolm, good morning to you. How are you?
Ger, how are you?
Good. This is an interesting time of year for players who believe they're in with a shout for selection. Did you enjoy the January before you knew you were getting picked, or were you always fairly confident that you were getting picked for that period of time when you were winning your 80-odd caps?
I was always sure I was going to be selected. Always sure. It's always a very exciting time, and it's actually a nerve-wracking time. I can remember myself, I got injured the week before we were due to play Wales in Wembley, and I dislocated my shoulder the week before, and I can remember injuring my knee the week before we were due to play France in Croke Park and following England. So it is a nerve-wracking time because you're a little bit fearful that you can't look too far ahead because you might get injured. And then the injuries you can miss a small injury, you can miss the whole season, or a very important part of that season. So there's that as well. I always felt if I was fit, I was going to get picked. So
who was the first coach that gave you that security? Was it?
That was just born within me. No. There was never that. You were never sure of your position. You were never ever sure, and certainly I wasn't. I was never sure of that. I never had that security because there was always great competition within the squad, and everybody would literally push each other out of the way or stamp in each other to get that opportunity to get the call. So as close as we were, we would do whatever it takes to get on the pitch ahead of the other. So we were a very competitive squad. So.
What was the depth chart when you were getting into the team? Who was just ahead of you that you pushed out of the way and stamped on to get in?
Well, I always found that it was a lot of the times, things just happened. Maybe it was for me but I remember Jeremy Davidson had just come off the Lions, and he ended up getting an injury that opened the way for me. And had he not been injured, my 92 caps maybe in half that. So you never can really tell how things will go and fare in that regard, and you just have to look after yourself and make sure you're there for when you get the call up.
Who was your first partner?
Paddy Johns.
Right. He was a mainstay in the team because he was the captain. So
yeah, he was the enforcer. Yeah. He was a tough nut and got tougher as time went on. There wouldn't be a ruck that he wouldn't lead with a hard part of his body, be it head, knee, elbow. So I don't think he'd have been one maybe for the modern game. But then again, I'm sure he could have adapted.
So you played a load with him. Who else would have been your main partners? You finished up with Paul O'Connell, really, is it?
Paddy, yeah. So started with Paddy. I would have had Paddy. I would have then a bit with Jeremy Davidson, that is. Mick Galway, of course, came in and out like a yo-yo. And then there was Gary Longwell had a spell. Paul O'Connell then, Donica, Mick O'Driscoll.
Right.
There was a fair collection of Irish legends there.
Right, okay. Well, let's talk about we'll talk about Paul O'Connell and his impact in a little while, but let's get to your current depth chart. This is going to be very interesting, I think, Malcolm. A lot of people will be like, ooh, this is mildly controversial. Your number one is Ian Henderson. I'm going to go 1 to 4, right?
Yeah.
Number 1 is Ian Henderson. Number 2 is Tadhg Beirne. Number 3 is James Ryan, and there's brackets around that, just has to prove his fitness. And number 4 is Ryan Baird. So why is James Ryan not number 1?
Because of his injury profile. I just don't think I'm really picking this for this Wales match. That's what I'm seeing it. Two boys have been playing. James hasn't played since he came off in the last international. So I think possibly had Leinster not had that COVID breakdown, that it would be different. Like James Ryan is a phenomenal talent, and I do think that he will play a significant role. But I'm just thinking Ireland-Wales. I think the first match Tyke Beirne for me has been exceptional. He just seems to be getting better. He's playing a lot more in that second row position now, and he just, his contribution just seems, whether you play him 6 or 4, seems equal. So for me, I think he is probably thereabouts. And Ian Henderson, he's come on a huge amount as well, and both of them with that Lions experience, would be a decent partnership. Now, look, James Ryan gets picked number 1 because he finished last. He still holds that jersey. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But he hasn't played in a while, and to come back in, like will he get 1-2 games maybe with Leinster, if he's available, then maybe that'll be enough for him to get back up there. He was playing phenomenal rugby, so I know it might sound controversial, but I'm de-controversialing it now, because I do that I respect his talent hugely, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was fully fit. I would have him number 1, because I do think he's phenomenal talent.
Had you felt, Malcolm, that he got back on side or had got his form really back on track at the end of last year after maybe a few struggles earlier in the year? And if not, maybe is there something that you'd like to see more from James Ryan when he does get back and fully fit?
I think with James came onto the scene, he brought something that Ireland really needed, like that little. He was similarly to what Paul O'Connell could bring. He could find a yard or two, those kind of real hard yards, and interesting lines coming back in against the grain, real tough lines. And then I think his next season, I think people were aware of that and awake for that, and those lines became less and less, and he really started struggling to find those meters in his carries. And I think this year now, since he's come back, he's looked like he's looking to manage the line out. He is developing his game, his ball carrying, and offering other things maybe a little bit wider. And he's developed his game as a more rounded game now, which I think is where he needs to go with it. And he brings that physicality that is in defence and in the hits. Now he's, do we still have that big question mark around him in terms of his health and his fitness? So that's there still, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and part of that is actually how much rugby he played at a very early stage of his career. And I understand why. We all wanted him to play. We wanted him to be made captain. We wanted him to play every game, to get every second. But in retrospect, maybe if we all had our time again, you would take him out of the firing line and maybe play him a little bit less often. The trouble was that there wasn't always a natural replacement, or there would have been a clamour, and all sports teams are prisoners of the now because they need to win today. I wonder, is there a lesson to be learned with Ryan Baird, who we all want to see? Like, we're desperate to see Ryan Baird get the minutes, but actually maybe the right thing for Ryan Baird's middle and late career is for him not to be flogged and playing every minute now.
Yeah, Ryan Baird is an interesting one for me. I think he's come on a lot. I really think that, again, the Leinster break has not helped him in this time. I think what he can offer at 6 as well is again, just so much choice for Leinster. He's just not seeing that kind of time at 6 either. So again, it depends. Again, Andy Farrell might say, we can bring this dude on for 20 minutes at the end of the match. It could be the difference for us. So his impact could be the difference, because he's such a phenomenal athlete, and we've all seen it.
Well, let me position this right. Let's say we see James Ryan prove his fitness before the Wales game. Pick your 2 second rows and pick who's on the bench for me.
That is the challenge, isn't it? And I'm glad I'm not the selector. But well, I think you're picking. For me, I think you're picking. You're picking James Ryan, and you're picking. I would say Tyke Beirne, and then you've got between the two lads, you've got potentially two good guys to come on. And that's a big call. I think I'd stick with Henderson, I think just in terms of his ability to cover both lads, cover the line out, everything like that. And I know it's probably less impact. Well, he is a massive impact to come on, Henderson, so he offers that as well. So I'm kind of going back on myself now, and that's just It is a tight call at that level, and it's just the nature of. But it's always been like that. At the end of the day, chances are James Ryan isn't going to be fit enough. That's my take.
And you give him the extra week because you're like, well, actually, I don't lose anything by making sure his fitness is at as close as it can be.
You have two very strong guys. One guy running the show in Ulster, Tyke. My God, against Ulster, how good was that guy? He was just so good.
See,
Do you?
Yeah. There's no one's saying drop Caelan Doris. No one's saying drop Jack Conan, but everybody wants to get Tyke Beirne in the team.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get him, and might be at the expense of James Ryan. Isn't that incredible?
See, it looks like they've earmarked Ryan for the captaincy because they've already kind of gone that direction.
Yeah.
So you can't.
Perhaps I've overlooked. Yeah.
You can't. Maybe you can drop him. I don't know, but it feels like it's the type of thing that doesn't happen in rugby. You anoint the captain, and then the captain gets a bit of a free pass on their form or whatever. But I don't know. It's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky. Yeah. And I just think that whole thing, and I don't want to be bringing it up because I know as a player, like the last thing you want to be hearing is these lads telling him, he's injured, and it's very, very frustrating because they know, I don't know, he knows himself, but that whole thing around concussion and stuff, it needs to be treated with respect, so I'm sure he's fine.
Notwithstanding that, right? Like if James Ryan was to take off a couple of months now, it's not the worst time in the world to take off a couple of months to make sure that everything is great. And then you do get the opportunity to give Ryan Baird really meaningful game time in massive games over the course of the Six Nations. Tyke Beirne gets to show that he's now fully a second row. We need to stop thinking about him as a potential sixth, and that's his role, and it's going to be his role for the next 3 or 4 seasons. And Ian Henderson's own injury profile, despite the fact he already has 70 odd caps as well, it's frequent where Henderson will put together a burst of form and then get injured and be out for a while, and then put together a burst of form too.
It does seem to be the nature of rugby players these days that it's hard to stay on the pitch for any real length of time. The old rowers were always kind of fairly had an ability to kind of get through match after match after match, but I don't think it's a good, like, if you look maybe even at Sexton's profile where he's kind of literally trying to get himself fit for every international kind of break and missing the kind of provincial break, the provincial pieces. I don't think it's a good idea to be kind of using the international blocks as your playtime and then kind of like recovering through the provincial period. You do need to get a number of games under your belt, to just get your eye in, and to come back for those high-level international matches as your first and second match.
Well, that's really interesting, right? Because obviously Leinster haven't played for a month because of COVID. Nothing to do with them, but in the papers during the week, they were saying, we've got a lot of players here. They all need a lot of game time. We had 3 packs at training. There was 24 forwards. And they're trying to keep them all satisfied and ready to go. And I've no doubt the next time they play, there'll be a bit of sputtering and the diesel will be a little bit dirty in the tank. So I don't expect them to be amazing.
You're back. You're with that group of guys. You're back to September. And it takes at least a good three matches to find your feet, to see where you're. Now the top guys can maybe get up, but like you cannot expect a guy who's had 6-8 weeks off to come back and be at the level he was at 3 months earlier.
Given that, right, does that feed into the selection conversation when Farrell is sitting down with Paul O'Connell and the rest of the group saying these guys haven't played any rugby, we know what they're they beat the All Blacks, we know what they're capable of, but actually what we're going to do in this Six Nations is give the Ulster lads, give the Connacht lads, give the Munster lads who are playing rugby the opportunity to come in and go, well, our depth is really strong now.
I think you'll definitely see that. I think you'll definitely see that, Ger. I think we'll see more Munster, Connacht and Ulster lads in this starting, because normally we'd see them in the squad, but we wouldn't see them start. But we'll see them start. Certainly a better, I'd say probably half the team. Because the Leinster, you just won't have had the game time. They won't be match fit. It'll be a bad look. I think it'd be a bad look to just throw all the Leinster guys on. And I think they'll show faith in the squad that they have and go with the guys that are performing week in, week out.
Unless, of course, Leinster absolutely hockey Montpellier this weekend, and they're like,
the game goes ahead.
They will forget about.
Well, there's still a couple of weeks for them to play matches. It's fair. It's a fair point that Eoin's making. There's still room for Leinster to play, or those players who are Ireland players playing for Leinster. There's still an opportunity for them to get in the shop window. But if for example, you were picking the team this week for Wales next week, you'd have to say, like, it would be no harm for some of those players not to be rested, but to be like, look, as soon as you get back playing, you're going to be back playing. You're just not match fit at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose you'd need to have games for those guys. Like, there's no point them sitting on the sideline with another week's break. It's not a break they need; it's a match they need. So it's tricky as well, because you do need to get those guys on the pitch.
We're nearly out of time. We need to ask about Paul O'Connell. Sorry. Can you see his impact as a second row? Do you immediately go, I can see the difference between having O'Connell involved and not involved over the last 18 months?
Yeah, definitely. I think their line-out detail has improved. I think the fact that James Ryan is now being, I would say, one-on-one coached by Paul in terms of how to handle the line-out. It's something that he hadn't really engaged in, and now I see he is engaging in. I think that's phenomenal for him and for all the second rows to have someone like him there. I think even their maul detail has really come up and looks super strong. I would say having someone like Paul, he's such a great character and enthusiastic character. To have him around, it just would be a real spark within the camp, and really exciting for any of the young players and rowers and back rowers alike to be involved with him. So I think it's just real positive.
In terms of the fingerprints that we initially saw last year, has there been a progression throughout, I guess, November, Matt, or is it just more work, more quality in terms of just getting more game time or more face time with the players?
Yeah, definitely. You can see his fingerprints all over it. Just as I said, the detail at set piece in line out, like I think especially line out defence. Like Paul would have been a real student of line-out defence, and they were so competitive in the November series, getting up in the air, pods up in the air, and not just O'Mahony. Like I said, like O'Mahony would be great at that, but there's all the other jumpers were involved now, able to read what was happening, getting up in the air. And that's Paul O'Connell's that's his fingerprints, the detail he'd bring to that would be beyond any non-specific kind of rower, so, and then I'm sure his detail around ruck, around and his general insight would have had an effect on the squad and the performance. I wouldn't be able to pinpoint anything exactly, but you can expect that his influence will be everywhere.
Yeah. All right.
Because he's that type of character. He's just a leader. He's very strong, and he's a great way with people, but he doesn't rub people up the wrong way. Like he'll bring a glue to the squad rather than kind of alienating himself or trying to take over or anything like that. Like he'll just bring a glue and a great environment to the whole thing. Yeah.